Okay, so let's start off with a couple of definitions of terminology, just so we know what we're talking about. First of all is backup. What does backup mean? So that's to ensure against data loss. So you should all be backing up your computers regularly, right? Everyone does that. To an external drive, to the cloud, using Time Machine. That's the Macintosh thing. Or there's some various cloud options for that. But it's just to make sure your data does not disappear. And this is pretty important. Why? Well, first of all, you want to be able to hand your assignments in and get a decent grade. So that kind of hits home for you guys. But just imagine having recorded an album with strings and horns, and a Tibetan choir came in from Tibet, and hundreds of thousands of dollars have gone into this recording, and then your hard drive crashes. Who is liable for that? Possibly. Hopefully you have insurance, but that's a whole nother presentation in terms of that. So backup has very real implications for the professional world, because clients are going to be expecting the engineer, the studio, to ensure that the data is not going to be lost. So any kind of studio that is working with workstations, which is pretty much all of them, should have some kind of backup scheme. And this is something that should be happening daily, usually in the evening, usually during downtime. It is going to be backed up to some kind of a server, on-site, off-site, various things like that. And we actually do that in the for the workstations in the concert hall control rooms. You guys may or may not know that every night those are backed up to a server. There's a scripting application that runs, and each one of the halls is backed up at a different point in time to ensure against catastrophic data loss, which has never happened in that case. But they say there's two kinds of engineers out there. Anyone want to fill that in? Yes?
Engineers that have data and engineers that are going to lose data.
Pretty much. That's what it is. So, and how many of you have lost data? Honest. Okay. There's 3.5 honest people here. Okay. So backup is just part of the standard workflow, and that's going to be the majority of what we're talking about here is strategies for backup and making sure that your data remains intact. But there's another thing that you guys need to do is you need to keep copies of your sessions, usually in multiple places. So you might be working in a studio, doing a recording, then you're going to take it home and you're going to do some editing, or maybe you're going to do some overdubs at home. But eventually it needs to make it back to the workstation in the studio, Joshi or 405. And you want to make sure that you can transfer mirrored images from your laptop to the 405 computer or wherever, and back and forth. Get those back and forth between the two so they're identical, so you can work on either workstation, you can submit your assignment and get a decent grade. We'll talk about strategies for that. So I'm not really sure what to call that. I guess maybe I should have another thing up there called mirroring. Essential processing committed to the track, so we just have one file per track. And you need to know how to conform to those. But it takes a lot of thought to kind of figure out how to go about that. So that's something we will hit in a bit. And then there is counting. Yes, there is going to be math today, but only in terms of 3, 2, 1. And this is a general schema for saving your data. And this will hold true whether you're archiving it or whether you're just backing it up to prevent against data loss. You need to have 3 copies on at least 2 different kinds of media, at least one of which is off-site. So typically you will have the version, if you're doing just doing the nightly backup of your computer, you're going to have the version on the workstation. Then you're going to have a version on your archive hard drive. It might be a RAID that you have in the computer. And then you're also going to send a version offsite, usually to the cloud. It might be Google Cloud, it might be Amazon, it might be Backblaze or something like that, which is offsite. So that means if your studio catches on fire, yeah, by that time, probably the least of your be recovering your sessions. But if you have, the Tibetan monks in there and they've been in a plane crash and they no longer exist, you want to, okay, that's terrible. If you want to recover that, it would be nice to be able to pull that down from the cloud. So those are kind of three things that we need to think about in terms of putting archiving together. Going on, there's the idea of deliverables. And I just spoke about those briefly, but usually contractually, deliverables are going to be specified. 2496 WAV files, your WAV ADM Atmos mix, MP3s, I don't know, whatever. The contract will state what needs to be delivered, but it'll also state what needs to be delivered for the masters. Pro Tools sessions, sometimes it'll just be rendered files. Maybe it'll be unspecified. There are also big liability issues if you think about this. I mean, there's the point of being able to make sure that your data stays alive in case of catastrophic data loss. But there's kind of another side. Let's say you're working with a great artist, or maybe a not so great artist, and you have a session full of vocal outtakes which are untuned. It's unlikely that artist would like those untuned vocal outtakes to go to the record company for obvious reasons. Or you might be working on something which there's security about it, new Star Wars movie, let's say, and they want to make sure that nothing is going to be released, and you're working on the assets. It might be specified that you can only keep certain deliverables or certain assets extant on your computer at the time. And it also might specify that those assets need to be removed at a certain point at the end of the session. Another example might be it's not really specified whether you're going to be keeping the files on your workstation or you're going to be archiving them after the session is over. But maybe the artist comes back to you 5 years later and say, that album we worked on, I never released it and I lost the masters. You wouldn't happen to have those on there. And this could actually be a way of making a little bit of profit. Yeah, I have those masters, but you're going to have to pay me to recover them. So just some things to kind of think about and keep in your mind as you are working. It's pretty simple here, right? You just have to make sure that you keep it alive long enough to submit it, and then your hard drive can crash. It doesn't really matter, but actually, you guys are doing a lot of really cool projects, so I expect you want to keep them alive. And of course, you never know what's going to be happening later on down the line. So let's kind of keep these definitions in mind as we go through this presentation. Yeah, well,
I just want to make sure, can you give, for liability, you gave a lot of, examples of it. Is there a clear definition, or is it just kind of more like you have to do it basis by basis, and this is the reason why you should be doing all this?
Yeah, I can't really answer that because it's going to be different in every particular case, but I think some are very clear. If you have the only version of a session and then you have catastrophic computer failure and everything is lost, are you liable for that? Is that in your contract? Do you have them sign a disclaimer which says, I am not responsible for it? Or do you carry liability insurance? So I think there are a lot of things that you don't normally think about, which sometimes need to be laid out. Now, if you are doing a project for Warner or something like that, and they're bringing an artist in for you to work with, they're probably going to lay all of these out in a contract about what you need to do. You need to insure against data loss. You need to make sure the stuff is archived. You need to deliver these deliverables at the end, and you need to delete them from your workstation, and we want someone to come by to confirm that those are deleted because we don't want you keeping those assets alive. It's all going to be kind of contractual. So no easy answer for that. Reality, most of the projects your guys doing, no one's going to really mention it. You just need to take care of it, and you lose the project, say, sue me. You're not going to get any money anyway. So, okay. But I think as you move into the professional world, it's something you're going to have to think about. And also, large studios like, Blackbird in Nashville, they have a complete IT department that takes care of all of this. They're going to have IT professionals who are managing all of the computers, in addition to making sure that they're all up to date and working. They're going to be backing them up nightly. They're going to be archiving. Again, that's a business opportunity. If you're good with IT skills, this is a good way to get into the business. And, maybe not particularly exciting, but people who are good with IT are a lot rarer than those who can do good drum recordings. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about archiving best practices. It begins with the project creation. At every you need to be, and when I'm talking about archiving, I'm talking about backup and archiving, but we're just going to be calling it archiving or backup, depending on what I've written on the slides. So it begins with the project creation. You need to come up with a scheme for naming, for folder structure, and a way of working, and you need to be consistent, and you need to stick with it. Because you need to leave breadcrumbs so you can retrace projects and figure out what's going on. And ultimately, any project needs to be able to pass the bus test. Do you know what I mean by the bus test? If you get hit by a bus, will someone be able to take over the project for you? In other words, will they be able to look? It's the bus test. Come on. Will they be able to look at your Pro Tools session or your Logic session or whatever you're working in and figure out what's going on? Or are there going to be 50 different project files, none of which is clear is the master? So you need to be thinking about this as you're going along, and there's various kind of protocols that we have laid out for you guys in terms of file naming and folder structure and things like that. So I'm going to come out of this. I am going to mirror. And now I'm going to switch to this website. Does everyone know this website?
I love that website.
Yeah.
You love that? Okay. You are the one. Thank you very much. Okay, so we put this together. It's got a lot of things, some practical things about using the studios, etc. But there is this Pro Tools best practices section right here, which hopefully all of you guys have read. What this basically says is that you need to come up with a scheme for folder structure and for naming that makes sense, something that makes sense to anyone and could make sense to anyone, and that you need to stick with it as you're working through your projects. Now, we lay out some general recommendations about what you're supposed to do. But it's hard to come up with exact ways of doing this because every project is different, everyone works differently, there are different requirements. The important thing is that you are creating that proverbial trail of breadcrumbs as you're creating these projects. And when you go back, there's going to be some consistency about what you're doing. So let's look at a few specifics in this website. So there are the folders that, let's look here. The session folder, they're the folders here that Pro Tools normally creates, right? When you create a Pro Tools session, we're going to talk specifically about Pro Tools at this point. It gives you an audio files folder, a bounce files folder, a session file backup folder, and there are a handful of other folders. And those are created automatically by Pro Tools as part of the folder structure, and assets get routed to those folders by Pro Tools. All audio files get to the audio files folder, and then when you bounce out a mix, you have the option of putting it in a number of folders, but it normally goes to the bounce file folders. That's nice. Pro Tools is very kind to do that for us, but usually you're required to create a number of other folders in the session file folder. So if you look here, there is a final mixes folder. One thing you want to be really careful about when you are working is that the files that are the masters, they're the finals, are actually identifiable. They're actually named in such a way that you know they're masters. Most of the time when you mix, you do 35 different mixes before you end up with the one you like, and maybe you go like 12 mixes back, and that's the one you want to keep. Eventually, you're going to have to extract that. You're going to have to put that into the final mixes folder and name it in such a way that you know that that is the final mix folder. Maybe the final mix is going to contain alternates. It might, be My Cool Project, Final Mix 2496, whatever. But then there might be instrumental only version. There might be vocal only version, things like that. But those would all go in the final mixes. And I think we recommend doing a rough mixes where you would keep all of the remaining mixes, and then a session archive folder where you can keep previous iterations of your session. And we'll look at that in a moment. So there's some suggestion about naming and how you go through the folders and how you name them, but you want to name them in such a way that you can tell what's in there. And there are just some examples here if you look at them. So we're doing a nice little Duke Ellington project, and you'll see that we recorded 2 songs, D. Ellington, Take the A Train, D. Ellington, Satin Doll, named in such a way that it makes sense. And then when we did our final mixes in the final mixes folder, D. Ellington, Take the A Train, mix final 2496. It's a nice naming scheme. It makes some sense. It means that we know the sample rate, we know that it's the final version, we know what project it belongs to. There might be other things that want to go in there. If you're working for a record label, there might be catalog numbers or other things. There might actually be a specified naming schema that goes on. But the important thing is that everything is consistent in here. So when I say that archiving begins at project creation, it's really at every point as you create assets. You're going to be creating, when you make your session folder, you're going to name it in such a way that makes sense. When you do your mixes, you're going to name those in such a ways that make sense. And then when you do derivatives, we don't really talk about derivatives in this document at all. You want to make sure that they make sense. So moving on down here, let's take a look now at this is a session folder. So let's take the A train. And you can see that here is our master mix. So this is our Pro Tools session. It's the only one at the top level of in the session folder. And it says master. We know that's our master mix. But if you look down here in the session archive, you'll see that we've saved a series of mixes, version mixes. So a lot of you are versioning mixes, which is great. You should be versioning mixes. But remember that getting all those versions in the main folder here can be very confusing. So by moving them down to the session archive, it makes some sense. So if you look at it, source, that probably means that this was the original tracking. This contains all of the takes. It's just right after tracking, we saved that. Then later on, we did some overdubs. So this is a session with the overdubs. Then at some point, we did some edits. So we can see that this session is the edits. And then you see we have 3 mix versions right here. You can see that there was one on February 25th of 2016. I guess you can see when I made this site. And you can see that there was another one on the February 26th of 2016, just standard mix, just different versions of the mixes. And here's one made on the 28th, and I added that little description, solos up. So this is with solos louder, but ultimately I decided that this was going to be my master. So this is the only session that's in the top level, but all of the other ones are down in the session archive. So I can go back and I can grab them. And if I decided, I saw your hand, Will, I'll get to you in a second.
Yeah, it's.
And if I decide later on I don't like this edit, I want to go back and re-edit it, I could go back to the source or the overdubs or the edit, and I could import the files that I need, and I could make another edit, and I could do a different version. So what was your question?
This is more just a naming thing. What I'm looking at the sessions, and it's like you have the title of the person, and then that's all like I forget the specific symbol, but it's like the mix or edit or overdubs that
You have a
just
dash.
a dash. Like,
Yeah.
is there a reason why to use the 2 different ones?
No. I think it's all about a schema, just coming up with something that makes sense. So I guess for me, and I'm gonna. This was what, 8 almost 8 years ago. So I have no idea what I was thinking when I did that. But I think I'm using the underscores as part of the name, to have the name with no spaces. But then when there is some kind of qualifier about it, I do it after the dash.
Okay.
So you see, take the A train dash, this is mix dash source. So I think that's the logic behind that.
Keeping consistency,
Yeah.
like you said.
Can you touch on like why not using spaces is like important?
So it's not important unless you are using a scripting application to migrate your assets around, in which case spaces can be problematic if it's a Unix-based system. So for me, this is just habit. So I don't think in this particular case for any of these spaces would be particularly problematic. But the reason we use underscores when naming folders and assets for the X90 stuff is because the scripting application that migrates everything is Unix-based and it does not like spaces. That is kind of a legacy thing. I was telling the 101 class today when we were talking about digital, they were going, why? And I said, because that's the way it was, and we have to conform to the way it was with the way it is now, if that makes any sense. You can quote me on that. Okay, so yeah, once again, this is meant as example. The actual name is not important as long as it makes sense and as long as it passes the bus test, right? Is that really more?
No, it's just funny.
Okay. As long as it passes the bus test, it's going to be fine. So whatever you name it is fine as long as it's clear what it is. Because in modern production, people are rarely working on stuff from beginning to end by themselves. It's always going to be passed from engineer to engineer and producer to producer. Most people are pretty cavalier about. Did anyone, was anyone lucky enough to be at Laura Sisk's demonstration a number of years ago? Did she show the naming schema of the famous producer that she works with, who I'm not going to mention in this video?
I don't think I remember it. It was
Okay.
either really
It was a lot of tracks named audio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. So a lot of engineers spend a lot of time cleaning this stuff up, right? I have no idea what this is. I need to figure out what it is. Your job, though, if you want to work and you want to impress everyone you're working with, and most importantly, if you want to impress engineers you're assisting for, you want to have this schema so everything makes sense. Everyone can look at your section and they go, wow, Jacob, this is great. I can tell what everything is. Roger, yours really sucks. You're fine. Sorry, I had to pick on someone. Okay, so let's go through a few other things. So audio file names. We thought about at one point like specifying audio file names, so we look for standards for that. So they don't exist. But they need to be descriptive in general. And one thing you need to keep in mind, and I think most of you know this, but I'm going to mention it because it's really important, is when you have stereo pairs, you need to determine whether left and right identifiers make sense or whether directional identifiers make sense. So for those of us who work in classical music, we assume everything is going to be done from audience perspective. So when we say, you know, decatry, left, center, and right, we mean from the audience perspective. Audience left, center, and audience right. But when you're working in the studio, that doesn't necessarily hold true, because piano from in a audience perspective, the lows are going to be on the right, the highs are going to be on the left. But from the player's perspective, it's going to be the opposite. Highs are going to be on the right, lows are going to be on the left, right? So how are you going to be mixing it? You would not want to send to a piano player's headphones audience perspective piano, because they would be playing high up here, but they would be hearing it in this ear. That would be really weird. Same with drums. Are you mixing from drummer's perspective or from audience perspective? Doing a jazz combo, a live jazz combo, you're going to mix them from audience perspective. Doing rock and roll is probably going to be from drummer's perspective. So directional indicators a lot of times should be related to an instrument. Hat and ride for overheads, low and high for the piano, rather than left and right in terms of those. Moving on, mix names. Just take a look here. You can see, you've already seen the final mix, but you can see there's various rough mixes, and again, they have a various schema. And as you can see, I'm not very consistent in my naming here because I have underscores here rather than dashes. I'll have to replace that picture at some point. Okay, So let's look at a few examples. Okay, let's go the other way around. So Luke's not here, is he? We can pick on him.
Hey.
I worked on half of that, so be careful.
Why would I be careful? Okay, so here's a pretty cool session that we did some time ago, right here. And this is the way it was left for us. And in fact, this is pretty good if you look at it. You will see that that there's a session here called commit. And my guess was after Jacob did all of the drum timing and everything like that, right?
Yeah.
And then there's string tracking, and there is brass tracking. So obviously these sessions were done after string tracking and brass tracking. But then there's another one called a cleanup. What does that mean? Right? So I sat down in front of this and I was going, wow, which one of these sessions is the one I'm supposed to work off as I'm preparing this for the class? And so what did I do? I looked at creation dates and I chose the one that was the latest creation dates. So that's something that can be done. So, you know, this is something that's not great. It's not terrible. I could figure it out. But it's not great. But let's look a little bit deeper into the session archives folder down here. And this is all Jacob, and he actually did a really good job if you look at this. So let me go ahead and open this session up. Is that door just vibrating and making us nervous?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so. Okay, so you can see that we have drums and a bunch of other instruments in there and a bunch of overdubs happening down there. But the drums have been timed, so beat detective, where would we be without it? If I listen to this and I went, wow, you know, this section right here, beat detective is a little bit off. I want to go back and redo that. I would like to have some breadcrumbs where I can get back and I can find my way back to that. And Jacob has left us those breadcrumbs. You see, I'm not picking on you. How about this?
Thanks, Konrad.
And if we go down here, we're going to see drum time. So if I open this up, don't worry, I will get the insult in. There's the drums, and you can see that's drums on Beat Detective. So I could go back here and I could make some adjustment to it if I needed to. Then I could go ahead and render it out, and then I could import it into the other session with the correction for that. So this is a really important part of working in workstations, is always leaving that path back to what you did before. There are a variety of ways of approaching this, and we're not going to get into that, what different ways it can happen. But the important thing is that it is there, so we can go back to that. There's also, if you look in here, you're also going to see he's doing some bass timing and some guitar timing and some organ timing. So apparently the musicians here had terrible time, but it's all been fixed through the magic of editing, and the breadcrumbs are left for us to go back and find a previous version if we need to go back to it. So that's a really important part of working in workstations, and think about it every step as you create assets, as you do the editing, as you move on to the next step. Make sure you have a version that you can go back to and redo something if you made a mistake, because we're getting into some really sophisticated production here, right? It's really, really easy to make a mistake. And if you make a mistake, but Jacob didn't save this version of the session, then you're going to have a lot harder time going back and fixing it. And we can probably go back to even another version, if we want, which has the drums untimed. If you go here, we can go back to the original tracking here. which is the original version of the session before any editing happened. So if someone said, Jacob doesn't have any idea how to edit drums, I'm going to go edit the drums. They can do that, etc. Okay, so this session's pretty good. It has it has everything that we need in there. The only thing that should have happened is at 11:30 on a Sunday night, Luke, and we can pick on Luke because he's not here, and I'm sure everyone will tell him that I'm picking on him, but he can handle it. What Luke should have done is moved all of these into the session archives folder, and then left only this cleanup in the top level. Then it would have been clear to me that is the version of the session I need to use. So this is a little bit wonky, I think, but I think it's really important. I guess maybe honestly, how many of you have forgotten which is the latest version of the session you are working on? Okay, there you go. Really easy to do. So, the producers and engineers wing of the Recording Academy has a series of documents recommending best practices for workstations, for deliveries, and things like that. And they spend a lot of time about naming and folder structure and things like that. But something I would love to see from everyone is liberal use of a session archive. Sometimes it's called a session history, but a session archive folder. And really keeping only a single version in the top level, then there's never any confusion. There could certainly be times when you want to have multiple versions up there. I can understand that. But there's one thing you want, one habit you want to stop immediately. Everyone is going to swear as of today to stop doing this one thing, right? Okay. It is assuming that you will remember what you did. Okay, that is a big fallacy, because maybe you won't come back to the session for 3 weeks. Maybe you won't come back to it for 3 months. Assuming you remember what is on that track that's named guitar is not necessarily a valid thing. You need to make sure that when you are working, everything you do passes the bus test. So here, let's take a look at file names really briefly, just to give you an example. So this makes a lot of sense right here. We've got basically your drums. The overheads are named in such a way that we know which instrument they're on. Same for the pianos. We see that we have double mic'd guitars. You can also see that the room mics for the drums are labeled by the instruments and not by the directionality. That makes a lot of sense. So these are well-named files. So let's move on now, and we'll see that we've done some guitar overdubs, right? So here we can see we have the proverbial tracks that say do. Why is it not going? Oh, there we go. Okay. So the proverbial tracks that say dupe right there. So we have basically done some kind of a guitar overdub, and everyone does that, right? You do Shift Option D, and it duplicates the track, and then you can move at lightning speed, impressing your the guitar player out in the studio. Wow, moving faster than I can. But then, unfortunately, the bus test happens. And someone comes to finish this session, because it's a really good session, needs to be finished. How are they going to be able to tell what those tracks are? Is that a double? Is that a harmony? Is that a solo? Is that a kazoo? But we used the guitar mics. We really don't know what that is by the name right there. And if we look in our Pro Tools session here, you will see that all of these guitar tracks are named in such a way that it doesn't really, we don't know what they are, right? Probably what we can do is we can look at the edit window, and we can see where they sit, you know, if it's just a portion. Well, we can probably tell that it's a double, or maybe it's a harmony, or maybe it's a solo track. Not really sure about that. What's my point here? My point here is that you need to name things the way they are. And in Pro Tools, remember that the audio file is named for the track name. So if I just make my dupe track, which I showed you before, that's what the audio file is going to be named. So ideally what we would do is we will duplicate that track, but before we record, we're going to go in and edit the name of the track and make it represent what's actually on there. This would be guitar, rhythm guitar, fathead, stack, or double, right? And then maybe we would do another one. This would be, now we would take out rhythm, we would say guitar, fathead, solo in terms of that. So what does this mean? Well, you can move at blinding speed on Pro Tools, but maybe you should move at slightly less blinding speed and make sure you're naming everything correctly as you move along. Pro Tools has a feature called batch rename. Learn how to use it. It's very effective. I saw that being used in the string and brass section. And it really helps a lot because you can tell what the tracks are. Now, it's possible that you might be moving too quickly, or maybe things are happening where you don't have time to rename the tracks. That's fine, but you should go back at the end of the session, you should rename the tracks, and you should rename the audio files, because you want the names of those to represent what they actually are, not what they might be. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of other things before we get into what you guys really want probably, which is how to do a backup. So I'm going to go back to this session right here. We'll go ahead and open it. I don't want to do that, so. Okay, so there it is. And we'll go ahead and open it up. There we go. Okay, so let's say this session is done. It's ready for mixing. We got a lot of tracks in there. We got some tracks with some edits. See, there's some edits there. Everything is kind of in position. But we also have a lot of alternate takes. So if you look at that, we got a ton of playlists that are going, and none of these files are being used. And if you look over here, we have this impossibly long list here of files. Yeah, right. So you know that every time you make an edit, it makes clip definitions in there. So something you should get in the habit of to clean this out is you should always be selecting unused. In this case, we can do unused accept audio files. It's going to select only the unused clip definitions, and we'll go ahead and clear those. And look at that. Made the list much better, right? So, recommendation is always to, on a regular basis, go through your clips list and clear out unused definitions. It's not, it just messes things up. Yeah.
Is that only in the playlists that are visible in the edit window, or is that?
It's going to be all playlists. Yeah, any playlist where clip definition is not being used.
Gotcha.
Right. So I'm going to select everything in here. Whoa. Okay. So now I've selected all of the audio files, but you can see that there are a ton of audio files in this session that I don't need. Right? Those are all the outtakes. Those are all the alternate playlists, alternate takes, things like that. And if we look at this file, this is 18.6 gigabytes of size, which really exactly not that much data. But if we are transferring this back and forth, it's a lot of data that we probably don't need to transfer. So if we're done with this session and we're ready to move on to mixing, we can actually create a lean version of this, which doesn't contain all of the files that we don't need to do. Now, you need to do this at the right time, and there's a couple of parts to doing this. But one thing you can do simply is go in and you can delete unused playlists. So I could select all of the playlists here, and I could delete them. Sure, I'll go ahead and do this. And then it may not let me do this. We will select unuse. Okay, I would have to save and I would have to reopen the session to be able to do this. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll do a save as. That is control command, or is that shift command?
No, control.
Control command.
Yeah, right, because it's different from Word. It always mixes me up. So I'll just call this KS. Terrible naming right here, but I'm going to remember.
Well, you said not.
See, I remembered. So now I can go in here and I can select unused, and now I can clear that out of there. We don't want to delete. And now I've got a cleaned up session right here. So now all of those files still exist, right? I haven't deleted those files. They're just not being referenced from this session. So what this means is now if I decide to do a save session copy in, it's going to save only those files that I've chosen to do that. So, right, and that way I can create a nice lean version of this which doesn't have all of the extra files that I want. There's another way to do this, which is maybe a little bit easier. And we'll go back to this version. When you do the save session copy in, you can do audio files. You have the option of saving the main playlist only. So I can do this now. And I'll call this, man, I hate trackpads. I don't know about you guys, but okay. And I'll call this lean. Okay.
If you do the command with left arrow, it'll select everything to the left of your cursor.
Do what?
Oh,
And command shift right.
right. We'll do everything to the right. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then option shift will do just the word next to it.
Sweet. I saved it to the wrong directory. I'm really setting a good example here. Okay, so now let's take a look at this. 18.6 gigs, 3.34 gigs. So I saved a lean version. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that I now no longer have the alternates. So what if I decided all of a sudden, so I'll open this up. What am I going to do if I want to re-edit the guitar solo?
Import session data.
Import session data. So I still have my bus test is intact. The breadcrumbs are all there. So I could just do an import session data, and I could locate to my session that I know contains the file, and I could find the tracks with the playlist, and I could import them, and then I could do my editing.
That's gonna be a fun one.
I just want to make sure for importing session data, because I need to figure out this issue where I had an issue where I recorded something on a session and then recorded something else on a different session save. With importing session data, if I wanted to take those tracks, can I just literally move them over and nothing else will be affected? Or
You would want to, in this case, we would go here. So we would choose that, and then you would need to find the associated tracks that you need, put them onto a new track, import them, and then you could then position that below.
can do that later tonight.
Yeah, okay. So this is just two different versions which have different record. Okay, I understand that. Okay. But there's still one issue with this particular session right here. It's nice and lean. It's all pretty colors. But now it's 30 years in the future. Avid has gone out of business. Pro Tools no longer wins. no longer wins. Pro Tools no longer works on any workstation. You're gonna have to spend a lot of money. Someone who has a legacy computer to open it up so you can open this session. But who was the trombonist on this?
Jeff Parker.
Jeff Parker becomes world famous, and he says, "I want to re-release that recording that I did as a student." So what are we going to do? Well, we're basically SOL because this session only exists because of Pro Tools. Without it, it's just a bunch of random files, right? So if I present, I say, "Oh yeah, here's the session." Ain't gonna work. Okay, so this is where the archiving portion of this comes in. You want to create a platform agnostic version of this recording. When I say platform agnostic, that means it can work on any particular workstation. And what that means is I want to consolidate all of these tracks into whole files, which are exactly the same length, have exactly the same starting point, right? Then I can just drag those files into any workstation, and then I can proceed to mix. That makes sense to everyone? So it's pretty easy to do in Pro Tools, right? We can just select all. I think that's pretty good. So it's basically selected the full range of everything that's happening in there. I think we're okay. And what I can do is I can do consolidate, which I always forget the command for that. Shift option 3, of course. And we'll just go consolidate clips. So let's talk about this for a second in terms of file management. So first of all, I'm going to consolidate these clips. It's going to take the track names as the clips. So this is a chance for me to clean those up. And one thing that happened here is that the strings were named array rather than string array, right? So I'm not going to do that just in the interest of time here. We'll just pretend I'm doing it. But we might want to go in and we might want to clean up the track names. So each of the audio files will be named. I mean, I guess we could do that, right? You're good with batch rename, right?
Yeah.
So we can probably just, it's probably we need to just do these
Yeah.
right here. What's the shortcut for that?
Option Shift R.
Option Shift R. So what we can do is we can just add a prefix, right?
Yes.
So we'll just go here and we'll go string.
And
That's all I need to do, right?
space
Or
or
underscore.
underscore. Yeah.
Gotcha.
The batch clip rename is Control Shift R.
That one I use a lot.
That
so.
one is not on any Pro Tools like list.
Isn't
so
that in here?
Not clip rename. But it's my
Batch rename right there.
that must be me.
Okay.
I look for it. I swear.
Okay, and then here, so we've done that. So string array, pass 1, so we can go in here and then we can batch rename string array. The second one, shift option R.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, it'll be the same thing. So batch rename is kind of huge. So there might be other things that we want to rename in there. Yeah.
Is the only way to make the clip name the same as the track name consolidating, or is there a way to, like in Logic, there's a way to take the track name and make it the clip name?
I don't know of that. I mean, is it possible to select multiple clips? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I'm just because like if I
I don't know if this would name all of them or not.
oh,
But anyway, this is going to name just the clip and not the audio file.
gotcha. Okay,
So in Logic, you can transfer the name from here. There's
Yeah.
like a command. Yeah,
I got it.
Logic's better. What can I say?
Cool.
Okay, so you might want to go in and do a little bit of renaming if you need to do that. Oh, one other thing I recommend, this is a completely separate thing though, is that you lock your clips once you're okay. You don't want to get those out of sync. Okay, so Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate these. We've done some renaming. We know names are going to be good. So another thing to consider is this is going to drop these files into the audio files folder along with this session, which is fine. It doesn't really matter. But some people would like to put them somewhere else. So you all know that you have disk allocation. Everyone knows this. You can point it to a different point right here. So you could point this to another folder, but I'm just going to go through a process here. So it's Shift Option 3, right?
Yes. It's my favorite command.
And allow.
One omega clip.
Okay, so there we are. So you'll see that these have all been changed into complete files. These are all exactly the same length. They have the same timestamp, and they start at the same spot, and hopefully they're named in such a way that people know what they are. So all of these can be dropped into a session, Nuendo, Logic, whatever, and it can be mixed in that. So now we've created a platform agnostic version of this. Now we want to create another lean version of this session. So we're going to do another save session copy in. But first we're going to select all unused, and then we're going to clear them. Yes, Chandler, I'm not using the shortcuts, but just deal with it.
And option C and option B.
And now you will see that we have a lean session where only the files that we're using are in there. So now we can go ahead and we can do save session copy in, audio files. What do we want to call this? A460
Lean 2.0.
Lean 2.0. We will call this consolidated. There we go. Consolidated. You know, my glasses are exactly, I cannot read a thing at this particular distance. So we'll go ahead and save this. Da-da-da-da-da. And I think I'm in here. Consolidated. Let's see how big it is. Okay, it's a little bit bigger. Why is it bigger? Because we have a full file, so, you know, the full length of it. So it's about 4 gigs. And if we go into our audio files folder, there are all the files, just kind of all the same length. These could be dragged into any workstation and they could be mixed. So this is that proverbial archival version of the session that once we're done, this is what we would want to save. And in many cases, this is what we would deliver to the record company. It doesn't contain any of the outtakes, and it is platform agnostic. So Chuck Ainley, who likes to mix on Nuendo, will be able to bring it into Nuendo and work on it. Yeah.
Would you ever want to do this where you don't save a different Pro Tools session? So like you track balance or you like export clips that are like the same size?
Sure. That would be another way of doing it. So you would, right. So there are a variety of ways of accomplishing this. And you could export clips as files. That's another way that you could do that. But I just find this is the easiest way because really what this is this gives me a good file for mixing. So if I want to mix, I could just do this, or for making an assignment for you guys. I could do this kind of stuff. But however you want to go about it, so that's more advanced. You guys know what Jacob is talking about in terms of that. You could, I guess I'll probably better save that. So let's go back to the lean version. So you could use the commit or the bounce commit if you want to do the tracks that way. That would be another way of doing it. You can also go over here and you can export definitions as clips as files right there. And it's basically going to do the same sort of thing. But the nice thing about this with doing save session copy in is that it all shows up in a Pro Tools session for you. And it keeps everything nicely together in folders. So there's a variety of ways of doing this. So does that make sense? If we're really creating an archival copy, this is the only version of the session that's actually archival, which 20 years from now can be played on another workstation. Now, let's say Pro Tools still exists. That's fine. We got it in the Pro Tools session here, and we can open it up in Pro Tools. But if Pro Tools doesn't exist or it doesn't support earlier versions, we have everything as individual files, and we can import them in and continue to mix. That make sense? Okay, so kind of a lot to think about, and I wanted to go over this, and we've taken an hour to do this. That's kind of crazy, but I wanted to go over this because it shows you that at every step of creation, you need to consider archiving and backup. At every point you do that because what you do is going to impact later on. How many times have you just left stuff on a disk saying, I'll get to that later, and later you get to it and you have, wow, this is too much work. I'm going to leave that for later, and it's still later. Everyone does that. So they refer to that as the digital black hole. In other words, digital is a black hole that will absorb all your money and all your time unless you deal with it up front. So at every point, you should be clearing out your sessions, you should be naming, you should be creating the lean versions, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of other things I want to, before we go into actual archiving, I want to point out just some kind of schema for working. So here's a session right here, and it's the cool jazz session tracking. And this is kind of pretty standard of how you might do a jazz session, right? You recording 2 tunes, and they do 2 or 3 takes of each tune. And eventually you decide which one is the keeper. So let's say we like take 3 of this first song, and we like take 3 of that last song. So a couple of things we can do to prepare this session for moving on. First of all, we want to know which are the songs that we are keeping. So you can mute the outtakes, anything like that. But what you really should be doing is basically, whoops, let's not do that in shuffle mode. We should be deleting the outtakes. So I'm going to delete the outtakes. And I could even take these songs if I wanted to, and I could arrange them so they're closer together. So we could, take this and we could move it. What did I just do? Okay. Well, anyway, go ahead and do that. So it moves the.
Oh, I think it's because you have the conductor track on.
Oh, okay. I probably just need to.
I was trying to form to the graders.
Well, anyway, usually you can do that. Whatever. So we could just select that. So I could arrange these so they're closer together. I like to move the markers with it, but you can actually do that now, right? If you use track markers.
Yeah.
Just track
I
markers?
think. Yes, there are track markers. But if you delete the track, then they disappear.
Yeah, there's so anyway, so I could arrange it like this if I wanted to do that, or I could leave them as they were. I wanted to get rid of that. I could leave them as they were in position for mixing. So this way, I know what my select takes are. There's no confusion about that, right? And then what am I going to do next? I'm going to clear out all the files that I don't need. And again, I'm going to, whoops, did I select unused?
Should this be done in a saved as version?
Well, I will save it as.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to save over that. That's a little weird. Sometimes I find that, yeah, we're gonna have to save this and we're gonna have to close it. So, session, and I will say tracking selects. So let's go ahead and open that up. I don't know why it's not selecting those unused. Maybe there's something in there. But anyway, doesn't really matter. Okay, so we've got the select. So now let's say I want to mix these songs. I want to mix them as separate sessions. What I can do now is I can delete the song I'm not mixing, and then we can do a save as, and what is the name of this? Blues. So cool jazz session. Mix. Right? So now I have only this session for mixing. I can then open up my selects right here. I can delete the other one. We'll delete that. What's this one called? This Day I Dig. Okay, so we'll do that. So cool jazz session, Day I Dig, mix. And now I've got my session archive, so I can drag tracking and selects into session archive. And now I just have my two mixes in the main session. So what do I have here? Well, these will open with just the particular track that I'm going to mix, but they all refer back to the same files in the audio files folder, right? So they're all going to be there. So if I'm working and I want to go back to an alternate or do some editing, I can recall all of that. That's fine. But contained in this session, which has multiple songs, I'm not creating multiple separate sessions here, complete Pro Tools sessions with the different songs. I'm just doing this save as to have my Pro Tools session files in here, all pointing to those songs within this session. At any point, I can go back to the original up there. And then if I'm finally done and I want to save this one alone as my final version, I can consolidate it. And then I can do a save session copy in, and now I can create a self-contained session which contains just that song. Does that make sense to everyone? Right? So that's the way you deal with multiple songs in a session. I often see that you guys will have multiple folders of the session, each for a different song, but each one of those folders will contain all of the audio files. There's no reason to do that. You can just refer back to the original audio files, keeping your session neat and lean there. And then when you need to, you can do a save copy in to save only the files associated with that cool jazz session blues to its own session. And once again, you have to put a little bit of thought into what you are doing. And then finally, what I will say is really important to do in Pro Tools is indicate what your final take is when you're done. So here's a session that we just did today. There it is.
We are.
And we did 4.5 takes of it, but the or 3.5 takes. But take number 3 was our keeper. So what I see a lot on sessions is that you guys just go ahead and start overdubbing on this without getting rid of the clips that are before it or after it. So a couple of things you want to do when you're preparing for this is, well, I should probably go in and get rid of my cue masters there, but I'm not going to bother to do that. But what you want to do is, just so you remember at the end of the session, at the very least, mute all of those clips so you know what the final version is. But ideally, what you're going to do is you're going to delete them because you don't need them anymore. Then I am going to select unused files. We're going to clear unused files. And now I can do a save as VR selection, and this could be select, which is what I would generally use for the select tape. So I know that's the version we want to use. And once again, it's cleaned out. It's still pointing to all of the original files that are in there. We can restore them at any point if we want to do some more editing. But later on, if I want to, I can do save copy in, session copy in, and it's only going to copy the files associated with that session, right? So file management, session management, you got to be thinking about that at every step. I'll consolidate this, there we go. And let's say we've done another vocal overdub. Okay, so I've created some new audio tracks in here, right? I've created a new mix file, which I'm going to save. And now I'm going to bounce this out to my mix final as a wave. And we'll bounce it out. Okay. So now there's a difference between these two files, right? Got something here in bounced files. There's no bounce files folder over there. Got a couple of new things in, those are named beautifully, so you can yell at me for that. We got some additional audio files in there. So they're not the same. How do I go about backing this up now? I want to back this up. What do you guys normally do?
Just drag it in again.
Drag it in again. Make another copy.
Replace the other copy.
One. And then
Replace the other
delete
copy.
old
Okay, so, and delete the old one. Okay, so it's fine when you just like a gigabyte, but you have a 200 gigabyte file, that's going to take a while. So in reality, what you want to do is you want to do something called incremental backup. So what incremental backup does is it looks at two folders, it's going to compare the contents, and then it's going to tell you what has changed, and then you can choose to copy only the part that is changed to the destination. So in this case, we have a source, which is this session here that I've been working on, and we have a destination, which is on my archive drive. So there are a variety of ways of doing this. If we have time at the end, I'll show you the cool command line way to do it. But I'm going to show you how to do it using this piece of software called Free File Sync, which it's basically just a program that compares and tells you what has changed. So what you do is you have two columns here. This will be my source. This will be my destination. And what we can do is we can compare the contents, and it'll tell you what's different. So I'm going to drag this in here as the source. And we're going to drag this in here as the destination. And then I'm going to click on compare. And it's going to take a look, and it's going to tell us what the difference is between those two files, right? Those two sessions. And what it's going to tell me is there's a bounced file that exists on the source that doesn't exist on the destination. It's got a lead vocal and a guitar solo that exists on the source and not on the destination, and an additional and a Pro Tools session. And it also tells us that the wave cache has changed. Everyone know what the wave cache is? Waveform reduced files. Okay. So if you look over here, you will see now I have a choice in this column here. It allows me to copy new items from one space to another. So this is, I'm going to copy the mix, and here I'm going to copy the guitar vocal comp, copy the guitar solo here, and copy the Pro Tools session there. So in the synchronize window, you're going to see that we have three options: two-way, mirror, and update. And we'll go through what those mean. But the one you're going to want to use the majority of the time is update mode. And what update mode is going to do is it's going to copy it's going to identify the difference between the two sides, but it's going to copy from the source to the destination any items that have changed or have been added. It's not going to delete anything from anywhere. Okay? So we will click on synchronize, say go, and it's done. And now if we look over here in our destination, we will see that it's identical to our source. So that's incremental backup. Okay, so let's make a couple of different changes here. I'm going to make a text file, and I will save this. File 1. And I'm going to just option drag it over here, but I'm going to name it file 2. Whoops, okay. 2, make this one file 3. I just want to get something that's different on here. So I'm going to, I've still got my same directories dragged in here. Everyone see that? So I'm going to click on compare, and it's basically going to tell me a difference here. So, I did a couple of things over there. So you will see that, so there's file 2 text clipping, and it's set to copy. File 3 set to copy. But over here you'll see file 1 exists in this directory, but not in that directory, but it's doing nothing at all. So what archive mode is going to do is it's only going to copy new or changed files to the destination directory, but it's not going to make any changes on the destination directory. Now, watch what happens if I go into mirror mode. Now what it's going to do is it is going to copy this file, copy that file. It's going to delete this file 1 here, because this file 1 does not exist on the destination, right? So basically it's going to make a mirror copy. Remember, I'm copying my source over here to my destination over here, source to destination. What mirror is going to do is it's going to make the destination identical to the source. So that's going to delete this file right here. If I don't want to do that, I want to stay in update mode. Now it's going to do nothing. Does everyone see the difference on those? Anyone not see the difference on those? Anyone not see the difference but embarrassed to say they don't see the difference? Okay, so there's a third mode, which is called two-way. So if we go to two-way, you'll see it's going to copy the 2 files from the source to the destination, but it's also going to copy the file that exists on the destination, but not on the source to the source. So it's going to create identical copies with all files. So 3 different modes: archive, which is generally what you want to use, mirror, and two-way. Okay, let's think about some examples of how we might want to do this. So let's say I am just working away, and and this is my backup drive. I just want to copy stuff over there. I want to make sure everything's saved, and I want to make sure that any files that I delete or accidentally delete are recoverable from the archived version of it. In that case, I'm going to want to use update mode. So now when I synchronize, it's going to copy over all of the files. So it's copied over file 2 and 3 there, right? So they all exist there. So even though file 1 doesn't exist over here, it still exists over there. So let's do another thing. I'm going to delete file 3. I want move to trash. And I'm going to edit file 2. Oh, that's the clipping. Okay, that's not going to work. Okay, my mistake. Let's do it this way. Get rid of file 3. Okay. So now I'm going to edit this. Text file edited. So now it's different. I'm going to save it, right? So now we've got file 3 on both of these guys. What do you think is going to happen when I do a compare? It's going to tell me that file 3 needs to be copied because it has changed. How does it know it's changed? It has a later modification date. So these modes are not only going to look to whether the files exist, they're going to look at modification date. And if it's a later modification date, what it's going to do is it's going to copy it over. And what that's going to do is it's going to replace the file 3 that's there, since the name is the same. So just something you have to think about when you're doing that. So we're still in update mode. Are we in update mode? We're in update mode. So we will synchronize. Right? And you will see over here, there's still just one file 3. So that's been replaced. So that's the instance where it's going to overwrite if there's been a modification on that. So in other words, if you're working in Pro Tools and you're not doing any versions, you're just saving, this will not get you back to where you were. You still need the version.
If you're doing like a different type of backup where you want to have previous versions of that same file.
You'll have to name it somewhere, something different. Well, yeah, something like Time Machine is going to do that because it does complete snapshots. But this kind of archive version is not going to do that, right? Nothing is absolutely perfect, right? So let's look at a situation where you might want to use mirror mode. So I'm going to, here I'm just going to duplicate that file, so file 3 copy. And so let's say that your incredibly mean instructor in A470 tells you that you have to have an absolute mirror of your session on your personal drive and on the studio drive. In this case, we can use the mirror version, and what that's going to do, if I compare, is if you see it's going to say this file 3 copy is going to need to be copied over there because it doesn't exist. These don't exist, so they need to be deleted. So let's go ahead and do that. So now the content of these 2 folders is going to be identical. So that's what mirror does. It's a two-way. It's going to copy over stuff that exists on the source to the destination and then delete stuff on the source that does not exist on the destination. Okay? So now let's look at a situation where we might want to use the two-way mode. So let's say Will and Noah, I'm not going to pick on Jacob and Roger anymore, are collaborating on a project, right? So you've recorded it in Joshi, and now you take it to your home studios, and Will records 15 bass overdubs.
You gonna do this 15 times?
No, I'm not. And let's say that he creates another version of the mix. So we'll duplicate that. So this is the old version. Check this out. I'm going to drag it into the session archive. I don't have a session archive in here. So let's make a session archive. And I'm going to drag this into the session archive, but I don't want it to have master. So I'm going to rename it. And we will just give it, another date in there or something like that. So he has a new mix that's up there. Who is this? This was Will. Okay, so Noah takes this home and he records a lot of guitar solos. And then he creates another session, which is, let's duplicate that, and we will call this and we will pull this down into, well, we don't have a session archive folder. And we'll name this with that 07. We'll name it to be the same. Mix. Okay, so now after thousands and thousands of overdubs, they get back together and say, how on earth are we going to resolve these differences, right? We're going to go through one by one and figure out what files are different. Well, no, you don't need to do that because we have computers. So I'm going to do a compare, and it's going to show us the difference between all of these files. And then what I can do is I can do a two-way synchronization here. So what it's going to do is you'll see it's copying all of the files from the destination that exist on the destination, but the source exist on the source, but not the destination, to the destination, and all the files that exist on the destination, but not on the source, to the source. So this is two-way. You can see the arrow is telling us which way they're going. So we can synchronize. Okay, so it's looking at that mix name that I did right there. So what it's going to do is, well, we'll see what it does. We'll just ignore it. Okay, and so there we are. We now have an identical version on both of those drives, and they'd be able to resolve the difference.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about what the thing was with the like equal sign with the yellow. Is that just like an issue that it can't understand?
Yeah, I probably should have caught that. And that was my fault. It's unlikely that would happen. But what they were is both of these files were changed. They both have the same name, and it just didn't quite know how to resolve that. But it didn't really matter.
Got it.
Wait, yeah, so I was gonna say, like, the names are different, but that's not gonna change anything with the file, right?
Well,
You're talking about these guys?
Yeah, like how it's mix lowercase and the one.
I don't think that should make a difference. I don't think it should be case sensitive.
Okay.
I think what it was the same name, but each of them had different modification dates, so it didn't know which one to keep.
Oh.
I think that's what happened.
Okay.
So I think that was just my stupidity. I probably shouldn't have done it that particular way.
So
You're
just
going to
the
remove
late-
that from the video, right?
it's all
So
good.
just did the latest one. Then?
Well, they're modified at the same time. I think the issue is that they're the same file with two different names. 'Cause they're both modified at 6:26 p.m. today.
Well, we don't know exactly what happened there. I think what happened was they are two files with the same name, but different modification dates. It didn't know which one should be migrated where,
I see.
right? Because it's doing a two-way migration. So I think that was the resolution. So I probably should have gone back and fixed that. So, but that was just me being not really paying attention. So this is a free program for you guys. You can download it, and it's pretty reliable. But it allows you to do this idea of the incremental backup. I see all the time on the computers multiple versions of sessions eating up a whole lot of space, and that really makes no sense. Using this idea of incremental backup makes life a lot easier, and you only have one version. Yeah, no.
What's your thoughts on doing all of your work on an SSD drive, and then keeping all of your work just on that drive, and then take while it's plugged in your computer? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but what happens when the SSD drive dies?
That's
Have you read about the Western Digital SSDs?
But,
You should read about those. They'll make you very nervous. Right. So never trust digital. Never trust a drive. I mean, having just one drive with important work on it, you can't do that. You've always got to be backing it up. And you got to have it in 3 places. Remember, 3, 2, 1. That's the only way you can be sure your data. Well, you can be reasonably sure your data is safe. Yeah.
I will say you shouldn't be tracking or recording onto an SSD, like an external drive. If you want a good story, talk to Max Stabila, but that's a great way to crash a session,
Well,
right? I mean,
but think about it. If you're using your Mac Studio going into a chassis, you're recording on an external drive, right?
I guess.
I guess. No, there's no I guess about it.
everything in
Yeah.
Master if you think about it.
I mean, would you record onto an HDD, like an external like disk drive?
You mean a spinning?
Yeah.
No, SSD should be fine.
Okay.
I mean, what happened to Max?
Well, the issue is like he recorded this whole like this take for like a big band, and then pressed stop, and then it wasn't writing fast enough onto the drive, and then it just Pro Tools crashed.
That makes no sense to me.
Okay.
Because, I mean, SSDs are super fast.
I don't know if it was an SSD. I know it was an external drive.
That's Max's fault for using it, not an SSD.
But
Everyone just
unless
put it
unless
like
you
Max.
have a Mac Pro tower, you're always working on an SSD drive. You're always working on an external drive.
Yeah. I mean, this was in Josh, I think.
Right, but what I'm saying is, everyone out there is using Mac Studios with a chassis, and that connects via Thunderbolt.
Yes.
So in effect, all of those drives, even though it might be in a PCI chassis, is still an external drive. It's connected through Thunderbolt. I think that's just bad luck.
Okay. Gotcha.
I think that's just bad luck. As a general rule, though, we used to always say record only to the internal drive, but I don't think that really holds true anymore. I'm sure people will argue with me on that, but I see no reason why USB 3 should not be plenty fast to be able to record. But more important than that is make sure you back it up and using this. Anything else? I mean, that's pretty much it. You want me to go through it again? Yes.
Can you talk about like hardware in terms of like drives and like I guess more long-term storage solutions?
Right. So that's a great point. I guess we should talk about that. So this is our final version that we want to archive right here. So this is done, and we have. Do we have a mix? There is. There's my final mix right there. Okay. And we have some files here. Okay, so everything is there. So probably what I would want to do is create in here a final mixes folder and copy this over to that so I know it's the final mix. Okay, so the question from Jacob is how do you store this until the Martians come down to retrieve it? Okay, so you're storing the file. You are not storing the drive that the file is kept on. So you can store it to a drive and you can keep that drive, but that drive might remain viable for 5 or 6 years. After that, you can't be sure that it's going to work. So any kind of long-term archiving scheme is going to be using the cloud, using Google, using OneDrive or something like that, because that's an enterprise managed system which is going to be doing whatever is proper to keep the data alive. They're going to be migrating regularly to new hardware as new hardware comes along, and they're theoretically going to be sampling the stuff that they have stored to make sure that it's all viable. To hedge your bets, you might want to store on 2 different cloud services. You might also want to have a local hard drive in your studio where you can access the stuff if you need to do that. But if you're doing that, you're going to have to think about migrating the data to a new hard drive every 5 years or so. That's just part of the deal of keeping digital audio alive. But here's what I would do for this. I would zip it. I would compress it. And let's say I'm saving to current class material. And then I would drag that zipped file over to OneDrive. Okay, this is going to take a while. Then I would bring that zipped file back to my computer. I would unzip it and open it and make sure it was okay. That makes sense to everyone? So I would ensure that it got there alive and it got there correctly. And then I could be sure that it's archived. Oh, that was, you really raised your hand there.
How do zip files work? Because it makes it a smaller file size, but then later you can get everything back. So the whole amount of the data is still there. Like, how does it make it smaller? What is it getting rid of?
So I'm not really prepared to do a lecture on file compression.
Okay, if you don't know, that's okay.
But no. I mean, it's a fairly easy principle to understand. Is that most data is redundant. So let's take the example of a CD recording, for example. So it's a recording of 5 songs, right? And the songs are separated by 2 or 3 seconds of silence. 2 or 3 seconds of silence, there's nothing going on there. So that data does not need to be encoded. So you get that idea? So what compression does is it looks at the data and it can separate it into data that's necessary, data that's redundant. And the data that's redundant does not need to be encoded to be included as part of it. Now, one thing you're going to find if you take an equivalent size audio file and text file, when you zip them, they're going to compress by different amounts. The audio file is going to reduce in size by less than the text file because text has more redundant.
Interesting, thank you.
It's a whole line of science.
I'm just wondering, because you keep bringing up it every now and then, do you recommend replacing your hard drives every 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, do I do that?
Do you do that?
I have been known to do that. No one does that. Are you kidding me? But if it is important data that I want to keep, it goes into the cloud. That's what I do. So anyway, I've got it here. There it is. Whoa. It's archived, it's safe, it's in here. What I would do is I would copy this back to my computer and I would open it to make sure that the data is fine, that the session opens, right? That means that it zipped correctly, it made it to OneDrive correctly, so I can be sure that the data is okay. So I can be reasonably sure that this data is okay. Now, if I'm really paranoid, I would go to Google and I would put it on Google Drive too. And then I would have it on 2 sources.
So you just put everything in the cloud?
Yeah, if I want to keep something for long term, I put it in the cloud. Because otherwise I would have to be refreshing my hard drives regularly. Yeah.
Me?
I'm calling.
Okay, I thought you were looking above me.
Yeah.
Is there an easy way to back up to like a drive that you have in a different location?
If
Like
you
on
have,
your computer?
if you can mount it as a shared drive. So, I mean, I can, for example, I could mount, so this is, I don't know what this is. Oh, this is 327. So I've just mounted 327 on my computer here.
Nice.
And so I could just use that. So if you know something about networking and you have stuff on the network, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but how would you do that? Is it
How would
pretty
you, okay,
complicated?
that's a whole nother lecture. How do you set up a network drive? We're not going to go there, but so just give me the example of, are you thinking of doing something specific?
Well, let's say like I have like a computer at home that I
Uh-huh.
don't even like use, and I was wondering like if there's a way to back up files to that,
And you say at home, is that like at
like
home?
in California.
In California, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a little bit more complex, but every has an IP address, Internet Protocol address.
Mhm.
So if you can figure out how to get that through your router, you will end up with a number that looks something like this,
Okay.
right? 3 numbers by 2 numbers by 3 numbers by 3 numbers, right? And then your drive will have a particular number, and then you can access it. The problem is going through like a commercial router, a like home quality router. It can get a little bit complex to do that kind of stuff. But yeah, absolutely, it's possible to do this kind of thing.
Is this essentially like using a NAS?
A network attached storage.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this is.
Okay.
But in this case, this is what's called a Samba share. I'm just mounting that drive on there, so I can mount any of the drives. So yeah, I could take this and I could, whoa, where'd it go? So we could grab something here. Anyone?
Who's got some stuff?
Bree
I
Kobe.
think Garrett's got some
No,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
take Garrett.
Trainer.
I was going to pick on Esme, but I don't see anything in there.
Take
You got to have something in there, right?
I've never done anything in my life.
Oh, well, we have to
Grab
do it.
Dan's. There's so many good.
Wait, where are you? You're not on here. You're doing 201, are you?
Those are student
Yeah,
projects.
these are.
That's not the course files.
Oh, you put stuff in course files.
Yeah, course files is for when we do the work. Yeah.
Oh God, oh no. Oh God.
Sports.
Okay, so here's Esme. Let's make something. Basic reverb assignment.
No.
So it just copies through the network. Don't worry, I won't play it.
Gotcha.
Right. So anyway, it's just like another mounted drive here
Okay.
in terms of that. So yeah, absolutely, it's possible to do that. And that makes a lot of sense. There are actually people who will do that in their studios. They will be connected to a network drive that might be in the building across the street, and is connected to a network. So it is possible to do that, but it takes a little bit of IT prowess to set that up.
Okay.
What else? Yes.
Can you talk about RAID a little bit?
RAID.
Like
Raid
Redundant disk array. I can, but I would have to look on the internet.
Okay.
Okay.
Shut.
Okay.
Yes.
So RAID. So RAID is a redundant disk array, and there are all the levels. And what it is it is a device which contains 2 or more hard drives, and the data is spread across the hard drives depending upon the level. So some RAIDs are designed for speed of access. And I believe that is RAID 0, where the data is spread across several drives. So only, like if it's spread across 2 drives, each drive only has requires half the bandwidth to write the data that's necessary. So what it does is it gains you a lot of speed of write and read access, but spreads it across 2 drives. This is a little bit old-fashioned because that was back when drives weren't that fast. Drives now are writing, well, incredibly fast, but we used to do that kind of thing. And I'll show you something in Pro Tools which used to compensate for that. RAID 1 is a mirrored data, so there'd be 2 drives, and identical data is written to both drives. So that means anytime you write something to the RAID, it writes the same thing to 2 drives. So if one of the drives goes down, you have the other drive. Okay, then RAID 3, 4, 5, and 6 use a more sophisticated scheme where they spread the data across multiple drives, 3 or 4 drives, and then reserve one additional drive, what they call parity data, which is data about the data. It's like metadata. And with a RAID 5 or a RAID 6, with a RAID 5, any one of the drives can go down, but the lost data can be recovered by using the parity data. And for a RAID 6, any 2 drives can go down, and the lost data can be recovered by using the parity data. So RAIDs are industrial ways of storing your data and giving you more data security, ensuring against drive failure.
Are they really expensive?
Yeah, pretty expensive.
Yeah.
There are a variety of them. There's disk drives that are called JBODs. Have you heard of those? JBODs. just a bunch of disks.
Oh,
So it's the same sort of thing where you will have 3 or 4 or 5 drives in the enclosure. One of the drives writes parity data, the rest of them write the data. You can lose any one of the drives, and there's actually videos on YouTube, people demonstrating them, where they'll open them up while they're writing data, pull one of the drives out, then replace it with another driver, and the thing doesn't even pick up.
Wait,
Wikipedia is your friend.
you had mentioned some way to do the data transfer through like the command console. It's something rsync, right?
rsync.
Yeah.
oh, terminal.
You were just embarrassed showing me that, and all I remember was the name.
Yes, I know, he like latched onto that, like it was a bad movie or something. Sure, I'll show you how to do that. And actually, if we go here, and you go on backup and archiving, and you click up on backing up your data, it actually covers all of this,
Huh.
including how to use rsync.
Oh,
So I'll show you how to use rsync. Let's find something else to back up. Let's get rid of that. Okay, let's back up this one right here. So I'm going to just make an identical folder. Right here, okay? Source and destination, right, is empty. And there's all of that. So, going to open the terminal. Oh, we got to make the terminal look cool. Yeah, that's much better.
Oh,
That makes us look geeky.
No, I gotta do that.
Okay. So,
hacking it.
built in, so the Mac OS is basically a Unix operating system. Nice fancy GUI on top of it. So all of the Unix commands exist. So if anyone, you've never done Unix, okay. Anyone, no, okay. What can I say? So rsync is basically an archive command, which is built into Unix. And the way it works is you invoke the command, and then you invoke options. And you do a slash. So A means archive mode, U means update mode, and V means verbose. Verbose means we're going to see the output of it as it is writing the data. So now I want to put in my source. And I'm going to put a trailing slash. And now I'm putting in my destination.
So it's
That's
rsync
going nuts.
:AUV, and then you just
Yeah, it's,
So-
I'll show you. So, okay, so that's been done now. So check it out.
so that's like the same thing as the like file sync you showed us earlier.
Right, but it's way geekier.
It's
Right,
cool.
exactly. It's cooler because the text
Okay.
is green.
So I'm gonna duplicate this right here. So rsync is going to do the same thing now. It is going to do basically an update. It's going to do an incremental backup. It's going to compare the files, and it is only going to transfer this one that says copy. So.
If you didn't,
Source. Now destination. And done.
if you didn't put
Very
V,
cool.
would it just not show you what
It would not show me this output right
Okay.
here.
And so then, how would you go about doing this onto like a network attached storage drive? Because I've seen Justin do that. He like me and Joshy, and then like do his hard drive at his house.
Yeah, okay. So he figures out how to do that. That's fine. So you just have to have a mountable drive. So, I mean, I could save this, I could do this same thing to the 327 computer. that I did, right? Because I just accessed it through the network. I'm not going to do that. But any drive that I can mount on my computer, I can do
so
it too.
he just accessed it onto the Joshy computer.
He just used it as a Samba share.
Okay.
So if you
Just-
Samba share,
Justin
yes,
What
Barrett's
is,
doing
what
Justin
is
Barrett.
that?
that is SMB, Samba share.
SMB.
Yeah, it's a Windows protocol for
Okay.
sharing drives. So if you look here at this, this I can connect to the. Well, here let's. Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't connect to a concert hall. But I could connect to Joshy, or I could connect to any of the computers here.
Okay.
So basically what he had done is he had figured out how to do exactly what Roger was asking about, how to get through his router to the drive on his computer at home.
Okay. Cool. So I could just have like a PC at my house, and then just like
Exactly.
know the IP,
Right.
and then link to it, and then just save stuff to that.
Or you could just carry a drive with you.
That's true. But what if
But it'd be
what
cool.
if I'm in I don't know,
Bus
a bus?
access.
Yeah, if I could buy a bus and then my drive gets run over.
Well, hopefully the
What if your-
discussion on
what if the
Joshy
hard
is
drive-
okay. Named it correctly, so Roger could figure out what's going on. Yeah, pass the bus test. No, you're right.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to be cool, and I've shown this to some students, and you know they'll like go into the studio and do this, and I'll get texts from the owners. Whoa, you're teaching these kids to do the terminal. That's pretty cool. So I can tell Will is all over this. It's right here.
Yeah.
So if you check it out, options. Now, there's this delete function. You can use that. That is the same as the mirror function. So if you add the delete flag, it's going to delete stuff that's not existing on the source. Okay, is that enough?
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.